Welcome to Esoterica lecture number 2. We are continuing our reading of Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. The first lecture is on my Substack, and you also find a part of it on my YouTube channel. So the full lectures are only available to paid subscribers on my Substack. Today we're going to continue our reading and just to perhaps repeat a few things that we discussed last time. Francis Bacon has the tremendous insight prepared by centuries, of course. And let's not forget by his studies of the Hebrew Bible, that nature could be controlled if only we know, if we knew the causes of all things natural. But especially if those causes were to be no longer teleological, but were instead purely efficient causes. That's to say, a cause and effect relationship that the human being posits, so that the end result, the desired result, is posited as the effect, and that leads to the cause that effectuates the desired result. Now, I am not going to read, in the New Atlantis, all these sections on the festivity and whoever they meet on the island and what their rules are, but I will mention that he doesn't really hide it all that much who their greatest king was. Their greatest king, of course, was Solomon. He gives him a bit of a different name. He refers to him as Solamona. Still, he does refer to King Solomon, as I pointed out in the last lecture. Um, Solomon is considered a wise man beyond any human capacity. He is considered in the wisdom of King Solomon as the one mortal being who has insight into the beginning and the end of times and everything in the middle as well. So Solomon has complete metaphysical insight, and thus you could say knows the causes of all things. So what Ben Salim is about, the island or the New Atlantis, Ben Salim meaning is the name of the island that he refers to as the New Atlantis, Ben Salim, the son of peace. It would be if we translated it. We will actually just now turn to what it is that the island dwellers are capable of. And I remind you again that the college, or that the text basically is ultimately, this fable is to be a prophecy that mythopoetically speaks into existence and creates a future, which is the blueprint for the Royal Society, for the British Empire, and for the imperialistic takeover of nature, really. That crowds out and has, as always, of course, empiricism is quite bizarrely near to magical thinking and entirely bereft of any genuine speculative rational thought. And so we find here the attempt to repair creation, to perfect where Yahweh left off, or Elohim, however we want to refer to the God of Genesis. Maybe Elohim is more appropriate. But this God did not create to perfection. Hence, the world is in need of repair. And this repair will come from the New Atlantis. The New Atlantis being what? Well, the New Atlantis is obviously a recurrence. It's not just a footnote to or an analogy to, in a sense, or a metaphor. It is the recurrence of a principle that is the principle of lack, if you like, if you want to put it simply. Now, towards the end of the unfinished text that we have of this posthumously published essay by, or fable by Bacon, the travelers who ended up in Ben Salem are now allowed into Salomon's house, this blueprint for the Royal Society, for the college. And they are not only allowed in, they are also allowed to learn the secrets of this house, of the College of 6 days' work, and what it is that they have accomplished. And I will just now begin to read from the text. The end of our foundation is the knowledge of causes and secret motions of things, and the enlarging of the bounds of human empire to the effecting of all things possible. The preparations and instruments are these. We have large and deep caves of several depths. The deepest are sunk 600 fathoms, and some of them are digged and made under great hills and mountains, so that if you reckon together the depth of the hill and the depth of the cave, they are, some of them, above 3 miles deep. For we find that the depth of a hill and the depth of a cave from the flat is the same thing, both remote alike from the sun and heaven's beams, and from the open air. These caves we call the lower region, and we use them for all coagulations, indurations, refrigerations, and conservations of bodies. We use them likewise for the imitation of natural minds, and the producing also of new artificial metals by compositions and materials which we use and lay there for many years. We use them also sometimes, which may seem strange, for curing of some diseases and for prolongation of life, in some hermits that choose to live there, well accommodated of all things necessary, and indeed live very long, by whom also we learn many things. So here is described what might be referred to as alchemy or chemistry, whereby what is produced are life enhancing, life prolonging medicines and curing of diseases. We have high towers, the highest about 1/2 mile in height, and some of them likewise set upon high mountains, so that the vantage of the hill with the tower is in the highest of them 3 miles at least. And these places we call the upper region, accounting the air between the high places and the low as a middle region. We use these towers according to their several heights and situations, for insulation, refrigeration, conservation, and for the view of divers meteors, as winds, rain, snow, hail, and some of the fiery meteors also. And upon them in some places are dwellings of hermits, whom we visit sometimes and instruct what to observe. So again, the motif here of the motif of the hermit is brought in now already for the second time. It is perhaps a bit of a stretch, but still those hermits, it seems, who live as well underground as on top of what can only be described as skyscrapers, not just mere towers, but skyscrapers, towers which also serve as antennas and are there to observe the island, its surroundings, and also the sky. Now, the hermit is perhaps here paradigmatic of, again, of the angelic spy network that we addressed in the first lecture, which is how this island is capable of gathering intelligence from around the world. Now, of course, here these hermits do live in a secluded manner on the island away from the other island dwellers. And in this way, though, this isolation from the rest seems to be crucial for them to gather the insights that they are able to gather, be it from the alchemical processes or from the observation of the stars. And this suggests that if there are such hermits genuinely, this seems to suggest that there is an ideological um, or religious binding of such hermits to the overall project, who are willing to live in isolation in a secluded manner in order to help sustain and support and contribute to the overall project. So something profoundly religious seems to be binding them all together, which is the overall project, the Solomonian project of trying to repair creation, I would say. We continue with remarks on how they control the production of fish and how they secure water supply. We have great lakes, both salt and fresh, whereof we have use for the fish and fowl. We use them also for burials of some natural bodies, for we find a difference in things buried in earth or in air below the earth, and things buried in water. So to point this perhaps out, what I didn't mention before, the conservation of bodies that is mentioned before, it does strike me as odd. I'm not entirely certain what is meant here by the word bodies. When he speaks previously, these caves we call the lower region, and we use them for all coagulations, indurations, refrigerations, and conservations of bodies. Does he mean human cadavers? Does he mean animal cadavers that are being here conserved, refrigerated, in order to use them, as he says, as mines? So are they mining organs? Are they mining for organic or for plasma, for blood, for other body parts that are then being used and that could be rearranged in a certain manner? Well, let's continue here. We have also pools, of which some do strain fresh water out of salt, and others by art do turn fresh water into salt. We have also some rocks in the midst of the sea, and some bays upon the shore for some works, wherein is required the air and vapour of the sea. We have likewise violent streams and cataracts, which serve us for many motions, and likewise engines for multiplying and enforcing of winds to set also on diverse motions. So he describes here almost in passing, so that bodies decompose differently depending on where they are buried, where and how they are buried. And this decomposition of bodies is something that they quite obviously already make good use of. So again, we're not told, are these also human bodies, or are they animal cadavers only? And what is it ultimately that they do with these, with the bodies and the different way that they are here left to decompose? There is also already control over the streaming of water. They have violent streams, as he says here. Also artificial waterfalls, as it's obvious from what he relates. So what is already capable, what they're already capable of, is moving water in whichever direction it needs to flow. And to read it again, and likewise engines, which are not further specified, for multiplying and enforcing of winds to set also on diverse motions. So there are wind turbines or wind machines that they can use to generate wind. It doesn't mention here how far this stretches, or this actually stretches out this capacity to produce wind across, at least to some degree, on the open ocean. Perhaps not. But in any event, on the island itself, the movement of the air can be at least redirected. And that's also, of course, to say that they can, uh, uh, according to this fable, make sure that the natural seasons are also tempered with. We have also a number of artificial wells and fountains made in imitation of the natural sources, and baths as tincted upon vitriol, sulfur, steel, brass, lead, nitre, and other minerals. And again, we have little wells for infusions of many things, where the waters take the virtue quicker and better than in vessels or basins. And amongst them we have a water which we call water of paradise, being by that we do to it made very sovereign for health and prolongation for life. It's no further specified what the water of paradise is and what it is that they do to it, but it apparently prolongs life. Now, it doesn't need to be pointed out that the obvious reference, the obvious biblical reference to the Garden of Eden, and still, again, these visions of the Bible inspire so much of what Bacon here is after: the return to the Garden of Eden, the return behind the fall of man, the return back to paradise itself through a manipulation of nature which is in need of repair as much as the human being, for the human being has fallen. We have also great and spacious houses where we imitate and demonstrate meteors, as snow, hail, rain, some artificial rains of bodies and not of water, thunders, lightnings. Also generations of bodies in air, as frogs, flies, and divers others. We have also certain chambers, which we call chambers of health, where we qualify the air as we think good and proper for the cure of diverse diseases and preservation of health. What he implies here, it seems, is that they can purify the air. So there is an awareness by Bacon that uh, viruses, bacteria can spread by aerosols, so that if air is purified and made sterile to a certain degree, then disease spreads less easily and less widely, and hence in such a quarantine, good health can come back to someone who may have been infected with a certain disease. We also have fair and large baths or several mixtures for the cure of diseases and the restoring of man's body from rarefaction, and others for the confirming of it in strength of sinews, of vital parts, and the very juice and substance of the body. Now, the very juice and substance of the body, that's quite a striking way of phrasing it. The very juice of the body perhaps is, of course, blood. So there is they have medicine to restore the body's blood to good health, and also to restore the very substance of the body. Now, I don't think that we should go all too metaphysical here on what the word substance means, but we can point out that there is an awareness by Bacon of also the ancient techniques of using hot waters and certain oils, ethereal oils, etc., to restore the human body and to bring it back to substance, so to making itself stand up again. Now, so far so good. We've not, except for, of course, the redirecting water in a violent way, which we can find also in the aqueducts, obviously, by the with the in the Roman Empire, for example. There's maybe the his mentioning of alchemy, that could be considered something that is a bit extraordinary, and of course the mentioning of these extremely high towers of potential skyscrapers. So there are a few already a few remarks that lead us towards our time, but there's also a deep knowledge of the ancient and perhaps also Far Eastern techniques and remedies for the body, and also an awareness of how disease spreads and how disease can be cured. We have also large and various orchards and gardens wherein we do not so much respect beauty as variety of ground and soil, proper for diverse trees and herbs, and some very spacious, where trees and berries are set, whereof we make divers kinds of drinks besides the vineyards. In these we practice likewise all conclusions of grafting and inoculating, as well of wild trees as fruit trees, which produces many effects. And we make by art in the same orchards and gardens trees and flowers to come earlier or later than their seasons, and to come up and bear more speedily than by their natural course they do. We make them also by art greater much than their nature, and their fruit greater and sweeter, and of different taste, smell, colour, and figure from their nature. And many of them we so order as they become of medicinal use. We have also means to make diverse plants rise by mixtures of earths without seeds. And now we are talking about something else. So you see, it's almost as though in between ordinary knowledge and understanding of herbal medicine that is as old as the human being, this knowledge handed down to ancestry, there's all of a sudden this rupture. Because there is now the fantasy of being able to make plants, a diversity of plants, to make them rise, to make them grow by mixtures of earth so that there are not even seeds any longer necessary. And likewise to make diverse new plants differing from the vulgar, and to make one tree or plant turn into another. So here we have it. Here the destruction and the ripping out of the telos is performed. This is where the telos of an apple tree, its inherent entelechia, it's coming into its own end, into its own purpose, into its own, even just its own function. Of course, ultimately into its own being, ripening in its own time, but coming towards only ever to itself. That is now taken away. And in fact, rather, anything, any tree or any plant can now turn into any other, or can be replicated without a seed. All that is required is an imaginal copy, as it were. By the way, there's a letter by Goethe to Hiller, where Goethe does explicitly, I think, say something quite similar, where he does point out that if at some point, if he can find the Urpflanze, the original or primordial plant, he will be able, or not he will be able, but one will be able, if that were possible, to find the original plant. And also to detect all plants as they exist now. It should be able to produce new plants at will from the blueprints that we find in nature, as it were. The one plant to rule them all, so to speak. So here we can see, and this is a very short paragraph, and you see, and it's hidden away or tucked away just behind, really just after an ordinary remark on herbal medicine. We have also parks and enclosures of all sorts of beasts and birds, which we use not only for view or rareness, but likewise for dissections and trials, that thereby we may take light what may be wrought upon the body of man. So he's talking about just animal testing, wherein we find many strange effects, as continuing life in them, though diverse parts, which you account vital, be perished and taken forth. So they're able, he envisions, he fantasizes, to take away vital parts, let's just say the brain or heart or the lungs, but life continues, resuscitating of some that seem dead in appearance and the like. So this is quite remarkable. Let's assume that they have an ape, a monkey, and they take away the brain, but they are somehow able to keep the basic body functions, breathing, digestion, the flow of the blood, to keep that going. So this is what he's already getting. This is how far nature has been tortured here, or can be tortured. It can be tortured to the point of being able to make dead animals rise, to make animals rise from the dead. We try also all poisons and other medicines upon them, as well as of chirurgery and physic. But by art, likewise, we make them greater or taller than their kind is. Now, again, by art, likewise, we make them greater or taller than their kind is. By art, by techne, by artificial means, beasts and birds can either be made bigger or smaller than they naturally occur, at will, and contrariwise dwarf them and stay their growth. We make them more fruitful and bearing than their kind is, and contrariwise barren and not generative. Also we make them differ in colour, shape, activity, in many ways. We find means to make commixtures and copulations of diverse kinds, which have produced many new kinds, and them not barren as the general opinion is. We make a number of kinds, of serpents, worms, flies, fishes, of putrefaction, whereof some are advanced in effect to be perfect creatures, like beasts or birds, and have sexes, and do propagate. And now comes the most important sentence. Neither do we this by chance, but we know beforehand of what matter and commixture, what kind of those creatures will arise. There's nothing empirical about this sort of empiricism. It is instead a crude positing of a pre-desired result, a pre-formatted result that is then willed into existence, so that certain creatures by commixture, by genetic modification, arise according to the will of the human being, who here stands in the same tradition as King Solomon, who is of the same, if you like, metaphorically speaking, bloodline, and who, as such, wishes to repair creation. We have also particular pools where we make trials upon fishes, as we said before, of beasts and birds, of course. Why stop on land? We have also places for breed and generation of those kinds of worms and flies which are of special use, such as are with you your silkworms and bees. I will not hold you long with a recounting of our brew houses, bake houses, and kitchens, where are made divers drinks, breads, and meats, rare and of special effects. Wines we have of grapes, and drinks of other juice, of fruits, of grains, and of roots, and of mixtures with honey, sugar, manna, and of roots dried and decocted. Also of the tears or woundings of trees, and of the pulp of canes. And these drinks are of several ages, some to age or last of 40 years. We have drinks also brewed with several herbs, and roots and spices. Bacon continues here on the many drinks that they have, but I won't continue reading it. I'd like to go to the next section where he talks about medicine. We have dispensaries or shops of medicines, pharmacies, wherein you may easily think if we have such variety of plants and living creatures more than you have in Europe, the simples, drugs, and ingredients of medicines must likewise be in so much the greater variety. We have them likewise of divers ages and long fermentations. And for the preparations we have not only all manner of exquisite distillations and separations, and especially by gentle heats and percolations through divers strainers, yea, and substances, but also exact forms of composition, whereby they incorporate almost as they were natural simples. So I think this last sentence again is the most important one here. So obviously all sorts of medicine to cure just about anything, but especially the medicine is such that it imitates nature, that it copies nature and pretends, for example, to be something that could be, let's say, of the human body that is being injected in the body. mRNA vaccines, for example, are such are the exact example of that attempt to inject into the human body something that is an imitation, an imaginal copy of what is found in already a rarefied understanding of what it means to be a human body, and that is then re-injected again to send a certain message into the human body. Now he continues here, we have also diverse mechanical arts which you have not, and stuffs made by them, as papers, linen, silks, tissues, dainty works of feathers of wonderful lustre, excellent dyes, and many others. So the mechanical arts are all wonderful as well. Of course, they've got a higher standard already in the production and manipulation of materials that the human being requires for a more pleasant life, let's say. In the next section, Bacon mentions that they control heat by diverse furnaces that they fashion. And I won't read this section, which is pretty straightforward, but the next one is utterly incredible. We have also perspective houses where we make demonstrations of all lights and radiations, and of all colors, and out of things uncolored and transparent we can represent unto you all several colors, not in rainbows as it is in gems and prisms, but of themselves single. We represent also all multiplications of light which we carry to great distance, and make so sharp as to discern small points and lines. Also all colorations of light, all delusions and deceits of the sight in figures, magnitudes, motions, colors. He's basically not just describing cinema and projection of film or photography on massive screens. He's ultimately describing holograms here that are so vast in their capacity that they can generate entire illusory worlds, and to a very far distance apparently, all demonstrations of shadows. We find also diverse means yet unknown to you of producing of light, originally from diverse bodies. We procure means of seeing objects afar off. So he's now describing satellite technology, as in the heaven and remote places. So, and also, of course, besides satellites, telescopes. Uh, so we procure means of seeing objects afar off as in the heaven and remote places, and represent things near as afar off. So microscopes, and things afar off as near, making faint distances. So in one sentence, we have the potential of satellite technology, telescopes, microscopes, making what isn't there seen, making near what is far, destroying nearness and destroying distance at the same time. We have also help for the sight far above spectacles and glasses in use. We have also glasses and means to see small and minute bodies perfectly and distinctly, as the shapes and colors of small flies and worms, grains and flaws and gems which cannot otherwise be seen. Observations in urine and blood not otherwise to be seen. We make artificial rainbows, halos, and circles about light. We represent also all manner of reflections, refractions, and multiplications of visual beams of objects. So again, he is stressing the capacity that they have of producing what we would refer to as holograms, as illusory, not just images, but entire, uh, you know, objects that appear in three-dimensional space without without being there, but producing this effect, and perhaps also being able to produce this effect outside of Bensalem, outside the island, so around the world, wherever they have their. And I won't read here what they have in terms of beautiful and precious stones, but now, after we've just discussed light and vision and holograms and satellite technology, etc., we must, of course, now turn to sound, to the most immediate sense of the human being. The ear is where our sense of equilibrium is located. We have also sound houses where we practice and demonstrate all sounds and their generation. We have harmonies, which you have not, of quarter sounds and lesser slides of sounds, diverse instruments of music likewise to you unknown, some sweeter than any you have, together with bells and rings that are dainty and sweet. We represent small sounds as great and deep, likewise great sounds extenuate and sharp. We make diverse tremblings and warblings of sounds, which in their original are entire. We represent and imitate all articulate sounds and letters, and the voices and notes of beasts and birds. Now, this is the crucial aspect. It's not just that there is a sound house where there are harmonies being performed that are yet unknown to the rest of the world, but no, there is a capacity to imitate and to represent all sorts of sounds. And of course, that's to say that the holograms that are being produced can also be accommodated by the appropriate soundscape, making it possible to generate entirely artificial uh, illusions of what is supposed to be there. This is a Plato's cave on a whole new scale. We have certain helps which set to the ear do further the hearing greatly. We have also diverse and strange and artificial echoes, reflecting the voice many times and as it were tossing it, and some that give back the voice louder than it came, some shriller and some deeper. Of course, they also have perfume houses, which is to imply that they also control the sense of smell. But I will now continue with something else. We have also engine houses where are prepared engines and instruments for all sorts of motions. There we imitate and practice to make swifter motions than any you have, either out of your muskets or any engine that you have, and to make them and multiply them more easily and with small force by wheels and other means, and to make them stronger and more violent than yours are, exceeding your greatest cannons and basilisks. We represent also ordnance and instruments of war and engines of all kinds, and likewise new mixtures and compositions of gunpowder, wildfires burning in water and unquenchable, also fireworks of all variety, both for pleasure and use. We imitate also flights of birds. We have some degrees of flying in the air. So, for the sake of warfare, there are what he does what there are airplanes. There is at least to a certain degree the capacity to fly and to send missiles, perhaps not quite airplanes, but at least missiles and rockets that can be shot across the air. We have ships and boats for going underwater and brooking of seas, also swimming girdles and supporters. We have divers, curious clocks, and other like motions of return, and some perpetual motions. We imitate also motions of living creatures by images of men, beasts, birds, fishes, and serpents. We have also a great number of other various motions, strange for equality, fineness, and subtlety. So, for the sake of warfare, flying has been invented by imitating nature. Of course, we learned later on after Bacon that imitating birds does not actually allow one to fly, that this was the basic mistake. Trying to imitate birds, if we had continued down this path, we would never have been able to fly. But regardless, the idea is there, of course, and it has been there for as long as there has been mankind. Daedalus and Icarus are perhaps in Greek mythology the most notable example of the human being's dream of flying. But now to something else, which of course is reminiscent of perhaps also the circuses at the time of of uh, of Francis Bacon. But I think we could tie this together with what we've said before about holograms. So Bacon continues, we have also houses of deceits of the senses, where we represent all manner of feats of juggling, false apparitions, impostures, and illusions, and their fallacies. And surely you will easily believe that we, that have so many things truly natural, which induce admiration, could in a world of particulars deceive the senses, if we would disguise those things, and labour to make them seem more miraculous. But we do hate all impostures and lies, insomuch as we have severely forbidden it to all our fellows, under pain of ignominy and fines, that they do not show any natural work or thing adorned or swelling, but only pure as it is, and without all affectation and strangeness. Now, of course, we've got all these possibilities, houses of deceits of the senses, but we are so pure. There's a certain, well, what would you call it? It is almost self-deception, isn't it? It's this peculiar mannerism of certain people who would say, oh, we are capable of doing all of this, but we are so morally impeccable that not only would we not do it, we have actually sworn on it that we wouldn't do it. And if we did it, which of course we will never do, then there will be fines. So, I mean, if they were so morally impeccable, they wouldn't, first of all, they wouldn't, they would not have those houses of deceits in the first place. They wouldn't need fines and they wouldn't have to swear on anything. But what's more important is that the vision is already here. And perhaps also this double standard of how this particular people does uh, does understand its own morality is quite perhaps also striking. But more importantly, again, is the idea, the notion that there can be holograms can be produced that generate deception, illusion, apparitions of any kind to induce or to effectuate anything that is desired, basically. So these are, we are told, the riches of Salomon's house, which again forms the basis for the Royal Society. For the several employments and offices of our fellows, we have 12 that sail into foreign countries under the names of other nations. Now here we are. He's just told us that we would never deceive anyone. But just a couple of lines later, we are told that 12 men do name under the names of other nations, so they conceal themselves. And there are 12 of them. For our own conceal, who bring us, and this is a quote from Bacon, for our own conceal, who bring us the books and abstracts and patterns of experiments of all other parts. These we call merchants of light. might, one might also refer to them perhaps as merchants of deception, merchants of spy craft, merchants of deceit and lies rather than merchants of light. But isn't it also striking that these are merchants? So there's a peculiar mercantilism at the heart also of Salomon's house, of Ben Salim, of these repairers of creation, who at the same time go shopping around the world to find the parts that they need, the replacement parts that they need to perfect creation for their own little perfect island there. We have three that collect the experiments, which are all in books. Now, he goes through them all. I don't think that that's all too important what they're called, pioneers, miners, compilers, benefactors, of course, benefactors, very important, philanthropists, right? So, and interpreters of nature, etc., etc. Now, this now here ends, at least what we're told in a couple of paragraphs, 2 more pages or so, is that the rest was not perfected. Of course, there's been praise of God, etc. All the different things one has to say to deter the readership of the time from finding any fault with it. We thank God for his marvelous works. And still, what really the entire text is about is to control these marvelous works and to repair them where they are deemed insufficient. Where, again, to come back to what he says with the commixtures, neither do we this by chance, but we know beforehand of what matter and commixture what kind of those creatures will arise, and we can make them big or small, etc. We repair them according to our will, so that we may, by drinking the water of paradise, return again to the Garden of Eden. New Atlantis. Well, Atlantis has one tiny little problem. It is bound to sink. And it is bound to sink precisely because it is predicated on lack. Hence, in the fable and the myth handed down to us from Plato, it sinks. It's the lack at its rotten core that makes it sink. That's what the sinking signifies, really. And it is striking that in our Kulturgeschichte, in our so-called cultural history, and also in the history of ideas, it is always and again to some Atlantis, but never Athens. But again, the New Atlantis stands at the beginning of modernity. Modernity is running its course, and it is coming to an end, I suppose. So it is time for someone out there to write the new Athens, to reconnect to that wellspring of the richness of being and of life that we find in Athens, and to be able to be a myth maker on, well, it's not difficult to be uh, more interesting and more beautiful, write something more beautiful than what Bacon has written here. But to be able to mythopoetically speak a future into existence that is a vastly different one from what we are here addressed by, that we are here witnessing, which is the beginning, again, is at the beginning of modernity, which is the trajectory of control and rebellion against being and against nature, for the sake, purely and solely, of the human being self-aggrandizing himself, and also ultimately the cutting off of the one of the genuine trajectories that we have, which is handed down to us from the Greco-Roman world, which is here no longer mentioned at all. Right? It's Atlantis and the House of Salomon. So, but I think a new era, a new epoch, if I dare say so, is beckoning. And that is the era of the new Athens.